A ver, vamos a dar la lección de pizza napolitana. How to make pizza dogs.
For a Neapolitan style pizza, you need 4 ingredients.
4 ingredients.
Flour, water, salt, fresh yeast. When you buy flour, the best flour you can get is Tipo 00. This is a very fine milled flour and has a high protein content. If you cannot find Tipo 00, you should go for regular bread flour. With this flour, you will need to use a little less water, but it will still make a damn good pizza. Always use cold water. In many dough recipes, they will recommend you to use warm water. This is to boost the rising of the dough in a very fast time. But when you're making pizza, you want a slow rise. This is to create the most airy and delicious crust you've ever tasted. According to the Neapolitan standard, you should always use fresh yeast. But if you cannot find fresh yeast, it's okay. You can use the dry one, just make sure you only use half of the amount that you would usually use with the fresh yeast. This is because the dry yeast is much more potent than the fresh variation. In a Neapolitan dough recipe goes quite a bit of salt. The most important reason is taste, but it will also help create a strong gluten network, and it kills all the bad bacteria during the rising and the ripening of the dough. When you buy salt, make sure to get sea salt. This is antibacterial and doesn't have all the bad additives in it. Great, we have all our ingredients and we're ready to start. So now I could give you a standard recipe for, let's say, 3 people or 4 people. But what if you give a pizza party for 5 people or 7 or maybe even 20? Then you need to customize your recipe. So that's why it's best to work with percentages. So for a traditional Neapolitan style pizza, you need 100% flour, 65% water, 3% sea salt and 0.2% yeast. But whoa, Peter, you said it was gonna be easy. That's right, that's why I made a pizza dough calculator, just for you. Choose the type of pizza you like. In this case we go for Neapolitan. The amount of pizzas, the weight of the dough ball. For a medium pizza this is about 220 grams. The amount of water, if you're using Tipo 00, leave it at 65%. When you're baking with bread flour, instead of Tipo 00, you should go for a lower amount of water, so between 55 and 60%. Now press calculate and kaboom, there it is, your own custom pizza recipe. We got our ingredients and we got our custom recipe, so let's get started. Get an empty bowl. Add your calculated amount of water into the bowl.
Bien.
Get your salt and add it to the water. Stir it until it's completely dissolved. Now you get your yeast and you drop it into the bowl. But wait, yeast doesn't like salty water. The salt will damage the yeast, preventing the dough from rising. So we need to make a buffer between the salt and the yeast. The way we do that is that we take 10% of our flour, we put it into our water, we stir it in until it's completely dissolved, and that will be our buffer.
Mira.
So now we're ready to add our yeast. So now we're going to add the remaining flour into our bowl and loosely mix it in with our fingertips or with a spoon.
Eso es fácilmente probable.
At this stage, the dough will feel very dry and flaky. Don't worry, just keep on stirring. After mixing everything together, we can start the kneading. The first kneading we do inside of the bowl, and after a few minutes you will already see that the dough is coming together and the consistency is getting more sticky and wet. Don't worry, just keep on kneading. Now it's time to take it out. Put a little bit of flour on our tabletop and start kneading the dough for about 10 to 20 minutes. In this process, the dough will get all its strength, the gluten network will be developed, and the dough will be ready for its next stage. After about 10 to 20 minutes of kneading, you can shape your dough into a ball. Make sure to check out my tutorial on how to make dough balls. Okay, we have our dough ball and we want to put it into our bowl. So before you do that, get a little bit of olive oil. Put it into the bowl, get a brush and brush it out. So when the bowl has a thin layer of oil, you can put in the bowl and now also give your dough ball a thin layer of oil. This will prevent it from drying out later on. Cover the bowl with cling film or a damp towel and let it rest for about 2 hours. After 2 hours have passed, you can portion the dough into balls. Check out my tutorial on how to make dough balls. So when you're done portioning the pizza balls, you can place them on a baking tray covered with a little bit of oil or flour. When all dough balls are in the baking tray, cover the baking tray with cling film. Now put the tray away for about 4 to 6 hours at room temperature. We're 6 hours later and our dough has risen. Now we're ready to make some pizzas. This is the most basic way to make a Neapolitan pizza, but you can also make next level pizzas. Check out my tutorial on ripening and rising of the dough to see how you can do that. Thanks for watching and see you next time. Peace!
Qué capo, qué bien. A ver, ¿cómo fue?
I will show you how to cold ferment your pizza dough. Why? Because you want to make a pizza that has amazing rise on the crust. It's covered with beautiful little char spots, had a bit of crunch on the outside, while the inside is filled with huge air pockets, making it the fluffiest and softest bread-like crust you have ever tasted. Besides from being an amazing pizza, it's also super easy to make. And did I say it's tasty? Damn, it's tasty. How to cold ferment your pizza dough. Let's get started. Mix your ingredients and knead them for about 5 minutes. Now, protect your dough from drying by covering it with a damp towel, or better yet, put it in an airtight container, place it in the fridge at a temperature between 4 and 7 degrees Celsius. Now leave it in there for 1, 2, or 3 days. Take it out, make your dough balls, place them in a tray, cover them and let them rest for about 4 hours at room temperature. Shape your dough, bake your pizza, and enjoy. Bim, bim, bam, boom. You're ready. What the hell just happened? What is proofing? What is fermenting? And why is this pizza guy singing? It just doesn't make sense. How does it work? Let's get started. The first thing you will need is a recipe for your dough. On my website you will find recipes for Neapolitan, American, Sicilian and sourdough pizza. Go to pizzadoughcalculator.com and find your recipe. Now you can mix your ingredients. But if you still need some help with that, then check out my tutorial on how to make Neapolitan pizza dough. After mixing, you can give your dough a quick 5-minute knead inside the bowl. Without you knowing, you have set multiple processes into motion. Basically, you have brought the dough alive. One of the processes that you have set into motion is that you have added many single-celled organisms. And because they came in contact with water, they are now starting to wake up. Oh, hold up. I know what you're thinking, but that ain't me. That's Mr. Yeast. And now he's awake, he would love to eat some sugar. So the first thing that will happen is that the yeast will start to feed itself on the sugars inside of the dough, producing gases like carbon dioxide and alcohol. Not only the yeast did something when it came into contact with water, also the proteins glutenine and gliadin got wet. And when these proteins get wet, they will start bonding together all by themselves. This process takes time, but you can help it a bit by applying some pressure. Knead the dough for a quick 5 minutes and let time do the rest. Once glutenine and gliadin have bonded together, they have become gluten. And gluten has elastic properties, much like chewing gum. So now the gluten are in place, the gases being produced by the yeast will be trapped inside the dough, making everything rise. To have an idea what gluten looked like in reality, I made 2 dough balls. Same amount of flour, same amount of water. The only difference is, in the one I used high protein Tipo 00 pizza flour, and in the other one I used low protein cake flour. Let's check it out. I will wash away the starch, so only the gluten will remain. Now you can also see why it's so important to use high protein flour instead of low protein flour. Next, I will blow some air into the gluten so you can see how incredibly elastic the gluten are. Okay. We know about your gluten, we know about your yeast. Why are we gonna put the dough into the fridge? Aha! That's because there is one more process that has to take place to go from a weak pizza to a strong pizza. Remember the white stuff we just washed away from the gluten? That is called starch. If you would look really close at starch, you will find that it exists out of starch granules. To create next level, super tasty, easy to digest, beautifully charred pizza, the granules need to be broken down into simpler sugars. This job is done by enzymes, lots of enzymes. The new sugars they have created will partially be eaten by yeast, creating more complex flavors, and the sugars that are left over will caramelize during the bake, creating more flavors and a beautifully charring on the crust. So the enzymes, they do a great job, but they're not the fastest workers, especially if you compare them to the yeast. Yeast eats sugars and produces gases like crazy, especially when they're in a warm spot. If you let this go on for too long, your dough will overproof before the enzymes finish breaking down all the starch. To prevent this from happening, you can slow down the yeast activity by cooling your dough. At temperatures between 4 and 7 degrees Celsius, the yeast will almost come to a standstill, giving the enzymes, whom are not as much affected by the cold, some time to catch up with the yeast. How much time you give the enzymes to do their job is up to you. Some pizza bakers go for 24 hours and say that everything above 24 hours is just for showing off, while others swear by 72 hours. But whatever they do, they all agree on one thing, and that is that time is the secret to achieve absolute greatness. We start by dividing our dough. Then once you get your pieces of dough, you ball them up, you put them in a container, put a thin layer of oil over them to prevent them from drying out, then cover it with a damp towel, or better yet, put them in a dough crate. Now there is one last very important step for the final proofing of your dough. Let your dough rest at room temperature between 19 and 22 degrees Celsius for about 4 hours. This is very important. There are two reasons why this is so important. The gluten are very tense from the cold, so shaping the dough would be an absolute hell. You need to give the gluten some time to relax and warm up a bit. Reason 2. All those enzymes have been working their asses off for the last few days, breaking down all those starches and turning them into sugars. And you know how yeast loves that sugar. That's right, so give them at least 4 hours to eat. In return, they will make sure to give your dough one less rise, creating all those gases, aromas, and other greatness. Okay, that didn't help, but believe me, this will be the best pizza you have ever made. Okay, now you're finally ready to shape, top, bake, share, and eat that wonderful wood-fired slice of heaven. That's all, folks. Enjoy, have fun, and let me know how your pizza tasted. Peace out.
Peace out. Qué cool. Tremendo.
Round, it's greasy, it's cheesy, and it's damn tasty. The New York pizza.
New York pizza.
You see, the base has golden brown dots. It's thin and deliciously crisp. Want to know more about the history of the New York pizza? Then check out this video. Want to know how to make it? Well, then stick around. Want to know more about the history of the New York pizza? Then check out this video. Want to know how to make it? Well, then stick around.
Dice, la pizza New York es hecha con harina de alta proteína, preferiblemente la de pan tipo 0. Bien. Si elegís usar un tipo distinto que ese, asegúrate de que tenga como mínimo de proteína el 12%. Una harina de alta proteína significa mucho gluten. Gluten le da a la pizza esa textura crocante y jugosa, y, o sea, de fluffy. que es exactamente lo que estamos buscando en una pizza New York, en una rebanada New York de pizza. Si, si está fermentando por mucho tiempo, como lo hice para demostrártelo acá, usa agua fría entre 10 y 20 grados. Si no estás apurado, usa levemente. Si estás en un apuro, usa un agua levemente caliente, digamos. Muy bien. La sal está ahí por sabor. Sostener el gluten y luchar contra las materias malas durante la fermentación. Bien. La pizza de Nueva York está hecha con levadura seca instantánea, que es más potente que la normal. En una fermentación larga de al menos 8 horas, usa la calculadora. Si necesitas acelerar el proceso, duplica la cantidad. O sea, mientras más levadura seca uses, más fermentación, más rápido. A ver qué dice. Ah, mira. Dice que el crocante no se lo da lo quemado del fuego, por más potente que tenga el horno, sino que se lo da la cristalización, como la caramelización que puede hacer el azúcar durante la cocción. Ahí va, el azúcar se va a caramelizar mientras se está horneando, agregándole a la pizza más color y ese crocante. Para prevenir que el bollo se te seque y se convierta en una piedra durante el proceso de cocción, usa aceite de oliva. El aceite en el bollo lo mantiene eh, blandito, digamos.
The tools we need: mixing bowl, scale, airtight container, and one of these. If you don't have a spoon, your hand.
Claro,
But
vamos
only
a
use
tomar.
one.
¿Cuánto es? Bien, ahora te lo explico. ¿Cómo funciona la fórmula de la pizza? Escúchame bien. Em, Ahí hay porcentajes. 100% de harina, 62% de agua, un 2% de sal, un 25% de, de ID, 3% em, de aceite, de oliva, seguro, y un 1% de azúcar. ¿Tá? ¿En qué consiste el porcentaje? Esto funciona así. Si vos mantenés la fórmula en porcentajes, como todo es proporcional, vos vas a poder usar la misma receta independientemente de la cantidad de ingrediente en gramos que vayas a usar. Entonces, cuando hablas del 100% es porque todo se va a relacionar con la cantidad de gramos de harina que elijas. Es decir, si vas a hacer 500 gramos de harina, de agua va el 62% de esos 500, que son unos 340 y tantos, ¿no? Lo mismo para la sal. De los 500, el 2%, que eso es no sé, 15 gramos de sal. El 25% de levadura significa que de los 500 gramos vas a usar el 0.25%, que eso te va a dar 1 gramo, 2 gramos de levadura, ¿no? Y así para todos los otros. El azúcar y y el aceite. ¿No? Esa es un poco la fórmula y es lo mismo para cualquier pan. Cuando vos hablas de la fórmula del panadero, quiere decir que como base de un pan, tenés que hidratar el pan al 60%, ¿no? 55 como poco, ¿no? Y el resto de los ingredientes, que en realidad para hacer pan no necesitas normalmente el aceite. Sí es buena el azúcar porque el azúcar ayuda a activar, lo que se llama activar la levadura, que es decir que los bichitos que viven en la levadura se despierten y empiezan a alimentarse de ese azúcar y empiezan a generar gas, que es lo que ese gas después cuando se explota es lo que ves, los alvéolos, los agujeritos que ves en la masa, es gas desactivado de eso. Entonces, hasta ahí, ¿no? Ahí tenés entonces la fórmula que, ya te digo, básicamente es la fórmula del pan, más o menos adaptada al producto pizza, ¿no? Pero que en definitiva
Dough recipe.
pan relleno.
I can give you a standard
pan
recipe
saborizado.
for 3 or 4 pizzas. But what if you give a party for 5, 7, or maybe even 20 people?
Él lo está
Well, then
explicando ahora.
you're gonna have to do a whole lot of calculating. Shh, forget it, man. Easy. I'm gonna help you out. Go to pizzacalculator.com or scan the QR code. Select New York style, enter the amount of pizzas, the size of the pizza, press enter, and boom, baby. Your own custom recipe. Mixing the ingredients, 2 minutes. Start by putting your cold water in a bowl. Then add the sugar, salt, and the yeast. Stir it for about 30 seconds so they start to dissolve. Now add your flour and mix it for 1.5 minutes. When done, the flour is still slowly soaking up the water. That's why it still looks like a dry, shaggy mess. Perfect. Now comes the first kneading. 2 minutes. Go to the tap, rinse one hand.
Bueno, el primer paso, que lo que el tipo está explicando ahí, es que vos podés mezclar todos los ingredientes juntos porque no tenés que activar necesariamente la levadura porque estás usando levadura seca. La levadura seca, a diferencia de la levadura natural, no necesita, creo yo, un puente entre la sal y la levadura. ¿Qué pasa? La sal, como entre muchas propiedades, ataca las bacterias, es probable que te mate la levadura si vos la pones en el agua todo junto. Cuando vos estás usando levadura natural, necesariamente tenés que agregar un medio que actúe entre la sal y el agua. Ahí tenés dos formas de hacerlo. O metés el agua en la sal y le metés un poquito de harina, haces un engrudo y a eso le agregás la levadura, o la sal la pones directamente en la harina, en el bowl, y lo mezclás lo suficientemente bien como para que cuando agregues la levadura hidratada lo tengas ese puente construido porque la harina ya está mezclada con cosas. Pero como él lo va a hacer con una levadura química de seca, que es más potente que la normal, como te decía, podés poner todo junto y eso se va a activar en el amasado, ¿no? Entonces hace como revuelve todo y lo une todo, pero todavía no lo amasa. Lo va a empezar a amasar ahora.
Making it non-stickish. And start kneading with your wet hand. All the loose, dry parts will start to come together and form one ball
En
of
el
dough.
amasado es importante que
Continue
uses la
kneading
mano,
and the dough will start to feel
según
wet
yo,
and
porque
sticky.
el calor de
That's
tu
a
mano
sign
hace que
that the
no
dough is
necesites más
starting to get
hidratación
fully
de la que ya le
hydrated.
pusiste.
So don't panic, you're doing great. Wash your hand
Y-
and chill for a minute. As I explained why we still didn't add the oil.
Y
As
continúas
soon as
amasando.
the flour has
Tenés que armar
hydrated
el
itself
gluten,
with
no
water,
tenés que amasar
the proteins
rompiendo la
gliadin
masa,
and
¿no?
glutenin
Tenés
are
que amasar
activated and will slowly
acariciando
move
la
towards
masa
each
pero
other,
fuerte,
becoming one,
porque eso le va a dar
forming
más
gluten.
fuerza a las proteínas, que
Much
es lo que
like
está
chewing gum,
explicando él, hasta que se
gluten
convierta
are
en una suerte de
elastic
chicle,
and stretchy.
digamos.
This is great because they can hold gases produced by the yeast, causing the dough to rise
Claro,
and to
ahí
have
tenés,
a beautiful airy crust.
Claro.
The reason I'm telling this is because there's one ingredient left. If you would add the oil before the water, the flour would hydrate itself with oil, coating the proteins and preventing proper gluten formation from happening. So for the best result, always add your oils and fats last.
Mirá.
The second kneading.
Esto es un buen dato, porque yo la solía poner adentro de la masa y hay veces que no fermenta.
Get
Si
the
le pones
airtight
el aceite
container,
adentro.
but make sure it's big enough so the dough can double in size. Lightly oil it and throw in the dough. The dough should now look a bit rough. Don't worry, that's normal. Cover the dough and let it rest for 1 hour at room temperature. Make sure it's big enough so it lasts. The second kneading, 2 minutes. Add the oil and now knead it in.
Amasalo con el aceite. Y
Get the
después lo que
airtight
haces es la
container,
dejas
but make
reposar
sure
en un
it's
recipiente
big
lo
enough
más
so
cerrado
the dough
posible,
can
si
double
es
in size.
hermético mejor,
Lightly oil
con
it
un poquito de
and throw in
harina
the dough.
o
The dough
aceite.
should now look a bit rough.
Usa aceite
Don't worry,
porque esta
that's
masa
normal.
americana
Cover the
es
dough
muy,
and let it rest
muy oleosa,
for 1 hour
muy
at
aceitosa.
room temperature. In this hour, the last bit of hydration.
Dato importante, cuando habla de room temperature, habla de lo que nosotros llamamos temperatura ambiente, y eso varía país a país y varía con la humedad. Cuando hablan de esto, hablan de temperatura húmeda a unos 22, 23, 24 grados. ¿No? 26, 28, si querés. ¿No? Te digo esto porque, digamos, si hace calor no pasa nada, pero se acelera el proceso. Y si está frío, se enlentece. A la masa no le va a pasar nada, te va a llevar muchísimo más tiempo el leudado. Lo digo por la referencia de tiempo que habla acá. Que claro, en una temperatura ideal de humedad y temperatura, en 1 hora, 1 hora y media la tenés reventando a la masa de divina, de gorda. Pero cuando hace más frío, como acá ahora en invierno, necesitas quizás ponerla dentro del horno o en algún lugar donde no le llegue tanto frío, cosa de que el proceso no se enlentezca tanto. Si tenés tiempo no es problema, porque hasta lo podés dejar adentro de la heladera, pero como está ahora,
Hydration will happen, the yeast will become active, and the gluten will continue to develop, strengthening the gluten. We already have the gluten inside the dough, but to make them stronger, we need to stretch them. Layer them together and repeat the process. After about 5 or 6 times, you will feel it's getting harder to stretch. Great job! You're strengthening the gluten. Close the seam and place the dough seam
lo que
side
hace
down
ahí
in
con
the
esos
container.
movimientos que hace,
Add a little bit of oil
le
to
sigue
prevent the dough
agregando
from
aire a la
drying.
masa y le sigue
Close the lid, and
ejercitando
here
la red
comes
de
the secret
gluten.
ingredient. Time.
Ahí va,
If
el
you
tiempo en estos
possess
procesos de
this
cocina es
secret
muy importante.
ingredient, you're on the path to absolute pizza greatness. A long and cold fermentation will truly transform your pizza from the ordinary to the extraordinary. If you'd like to know more about the science behind this technique, then check out my video. And if you just want to know how to do it, then this is your lucky day. How to cold ferment. After 1 hour of room temperature, simply place the container into the fridge between 4 and 7 degrees Celsius.
Yeah.
Take it out after 1, 2, or even 3 days. The longer it's in, more fermentation will take place, the easier the pizza is to digest, and the more depth of flavor you will create. Make individual dough balls. With a similar technique as before, stretch, fold, stretch, fold. When you feel the tension of the gluten, close the seam and place them seam side down on a lightly floured or oiled surface.
Okay.
Then oil the dough, cover them, and let them rest one last time. I know you're hungry and I know you want to start baking, but you have to understand that making pizza with a cold dough will not only be hard due to the dense gluten, also the taste and structure will be half as good as when you use a warmer dough. So wait until the dough is about 20 degrees Celsius. This will take between 2 and 4 hours depending on your room temperature.
Claro.
In this time, the yeast warms
Eso
up,
es lo que te decía,
producing
¿viste? Mirá
gases
cómo está
and tasty
eso.
aromas that will
Está
expand.
divina.
At the same time, the gluten will relax, making the dough supple and soft.
Claro.
So when you bake your pizza, the gases can gently move the crust up all the way to pizza heaven. Your oven. Every oven is a bit different, so let's have a look. In an ideal situation, you want 3 types of heat. Radiation, that will come from the broiler in the top of your oven. Convection, from the fan circulating hot air through the oven. So if you have one, turn it on. Third, you will need an oven floor that will store and conduct heat. Wood-fired ovens in general have stone floors. And those are great, but for inside a home oven that doesn't get as hot, a steel floor will be more suited. Since steel conducts heat fast, so even with a lower temperature oven, the steel will conduct heat right into the pizza, ensuring a beautiful, brown, crunchy pizza base. Place the pizza steel 2/3 up in the oven, where you will find most heat.
Está re de moda usar esas
Turn the oven
baldosas
on
térmicas
and let
para
it
hacer pizza
preheat
porque
for
te hace mucho
45
mejor
minutes,
piso
max temperature.
que las asederas
In
normales.
my case, that's 175 degrees Celsius. Want to order yourself a pizza steel? Go to stettlermade.com. Fill in the discount code KEEPITSTEEL to get yourself the discount deal. Oh yes! If you already have a pizza stone at home and you're happy with it, then use that one. The New York pizza. Give your working bench a light dusting. Stretch your dough, sauce it. Now a New York pizza is baked for a relatively long time, between 8 and 12 minutes.
Claro.
Meaning the moisture in the sauce will evaporate, and if you would use a high moisture mozzarella, it would start sweating. So to prevent all this pizza drama, get yourself a low moisture mozzarella or any other low moisture, not too salty cheese. Grate it or cut it into small pieces, cover the whole pizza with it to form an insulating layer for the sauce, preventing it from drying during the long bake, keeping everything nice and juicy,
Claro.
while the base stays dry and crunchy. Slide the dough onto your peel. Do the wiggle test to see if the pizza will come loose. Launch the pizza onto your hot pizza steel and bake it between 8 and 12 minutes, depending on your oven. Take out when the cheese starts to bubble and the crust is getting color. Look at that! A beautiful, greasy, cheesy New York pizza.
Qué disparate. Es hermosa la pizza. Además eso te sirve para todo, porque ese pan es riquísimo. No tiene por qué ser solo pizza, puedes hacer cualquier cosa con eso.
Yes, baby.
Ese pan es
Look at
espectacular.
that beautiful brown base.